What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Swingman podcast. It's podcast number 144, and we are well within the depths now of the NBA playoffs. As ever, I'm your host, Jordan Ledger, joined as I am all the time by Louis Halpin and Lewis Howard, here to go through a little bit on what we've had in the playoffs so far, but kind of talk about what's going on in it right now and where we expect to be going in the future. Obviously, boys, last time we sat down, we done one of these. We've predicted a damn near perfect bracket, shall I say? No, it's been terrible as per usual. And normally we get, to be fair, I think we got a few right. Did we get a few right? I want to say, off the top of my dome.
But that's kind of like,
Yeah, that's the low bars on the floor, if that's what we're aiming
for. No one gets a perfect bracket. So no one gets a perfect bracket. How you two doing? You well?
Yeah, standard. Man United ruining my weekend.
Nice.
Well, to be fair, it's a Monday this time, but as per usual.
Yeah, all good for me personally. I got the Kendrick Lamar tour top on at the minute, repping an interesting unfolding there. Let's talk about some Canadians getting smoked on and off the court at this moment in time.
Nice. I think as we're going into this end, where do we want to dive into first? Where do we want to go? What's the topping point? Are we really going to attack my Sixers to start off the bat? I feel like it's the title of this podcast. It's Joel Eclipse by Josh Hart or whatever we've landed on for it. Do we crack into that and then talk about the Knicks? Because as much as I want to arc on about how bad, not even how bad the Sixers were, I think the Sixers were good in parts, but the Knicks are no joke. They're no laughing stock team that they were a couple of years back now. This is a serious team.
Yeah, I mean, basically with the Sixers, you just had a couple of people drop stinker each game that they lost, and when you're against a team like the Knicks, who you say that they aren't a joke. They play hard. They've got a budding superstar in Jalen Brunson. I think at this point you've got to say, I think there was the stat line of he's the first person that's had like 4 40-point games in a row since MJ or something like that. I mean, the Michael Jordan comparison is mental, but these stats always come out when someone's on a heater. But as you say, I think the Sixers more now, it's especially with what happened with Embiid during that series as well, failed to mention that he was injured. He put up some good numbers and had some good games even with that injury. But you look for them more towards the off-season and what's going to happen. I know Tobias Harris has been a point of conversation on not which team wants him, which team will take him, because the list is very low. And then for Philly, it's getting that potential third star. I saw the odds for Jimmy Butler going to the Sixers today were higher. They were the best odds out of any team to take him. That's an option. I know generally most of the ones are linked to some wing defenders or just wings in general. I think that everyone knows that's probably the best fit with Maxey and Embiid leading forward. So even though it's disappointing now for the Sixers, they've still got, I think, a good outlook on the future and an exciting off-season ahead.
I think, it was probably the funnest first round series for me, not in terms of quality of basketball. I just think everything surrounding it, the sort of narratives and the atmospheres and the villainous sort of persona that Embiid played to in MSG, and then the crowd in Philly as well. It was pretty fun. I think it's just hard because we talk about these series with Philly, and you always have to have the caveat that he's not, Joel Embiid, I should say, is not fully healthy. And he obviously wasn't fully here. The knee, the Bell's palsy, the everything basically. So it's just a bit of a shame we can't see him at his full peak. I just think. I think he had some big games, and I think he, the fact that he was on the court and he was playing was pretty good. I wouldn't have been surprised if they just sort of called it at some stage, because I just don't think after the first couple of games they were going to win this series. I just think he needs some more help in the fourth quarters. I think this isn't just sort of a health thing. I think he struggles in those, especially in the playoffs, because of the type of player he is. The heavy post type of player. He's not got that sort of shooting touch that Jokic has, or the sort of even combination with Maxey at this moment in time to really pull him through those fourth quarters. So I think they really do need that, like you say, that Jimmy Butler, maybe that Paul George. I know those ideas have been floated. And I think, Tyrese Maxey deserves some credit for the series as well, considering he's the only reason that got extended to the sixth game, right? He absolutely killed it in that fourth quarter in MSG and silenced that crowd. So I think it was an interesting one. It just feels like another one with the Sixers and another one with Embiid. he just needs to get to that final, well, at least to an Eastern Conference Finals at some stage. I read somewhere there's the only MVP that's never made a conference finals, which is insane. So, yeah, like you said, an interesting off-season. We'll see how it goes with that cap space, and finally Tobias Harris out the door. It'd be quite ironic if Butler is the one to replace him.
I did see stuff from Daryl Morey's sort of like exit conference that they always tend to do, and he wasn't closing the door on a Tobias Harris return. Obviously, nowhere near the same amount of money is going to be offered for him, but I think that there is an option if he's willing to take lower money that he's going to be in and around a team that can compete. If he wants to get full whack of what he expects to be paid, he's going Charlotte, Detroit, or any one of those. So it's kind of where his mindset is as well. If he thinks he still can offer anything on a championship team, which I'm not really sure what there is to offer in that respect. So I think he will be searching for big money, and then depending on where he is towards the back end of his career, if he goes for vet mins or not. But I think it's going to be, you're going to be looking at a wing type player for Philly, but that's all stuff for the off season. We can talk about that then.
Yeah.
In terms of the other playoff dramas for it as well, I want to talk about this. And I'm sure if you're listening to this, it's the main story within the NBA is what I would say right now. And it is Anthony Edwards and those damn Timberwolves against these Nuggets right now. They are I would say, revelation of the playoffs. I'd say people had no sort of idea how good this Timberwolves team would be. No one had them propping up 2-0 against Denver in the first two games, especially at Denver. I think they've been nothing short of sensational in terms of how everyone's buying into the system, how well everyone is just playing. Is there a realm in which at the minute when we're talking about this Denver are 2-0 down, do you see any way back for them? I know that this is a championship caliber team. Jokic is their MVP, but it almost seems like writing's on the wall. And I know that that's the sort of territory for it, but what are your two thoughts on this?
2-0 down and you've lost your two home games, I think most people would say is an incredibly slim chance for Denver. If you ask me now, who I think going to win the series, I think Timberwolves are going to win the series because especially in that second game. The defense is just suffocating. They're forcing Jokic to turn over the ball way more than he usually does. He's usually very good when it comes to the assist-turnover ratio. He's giving it up a lot. He's also shooting quite inefficiently for his standards. And then, that's one thing. I know in the first game, he obviously had a big stat line still, but the turnovers were definitely a problem. And he was inefficient even though he got to the line well. But more importantly than that, most importantly, I want to talk about the Timberwolves, but just quickly, Jamal Murray obviously suffered a little bit in that Lakers game, even though he hit 2 game winners. So you can't really complain too much if he won 2 games basically. But he wasn't shooting well. And in these first 2 games against Timberwolves, especially the last one, I think went 3 of 18. He's just not getting any space whatsoever, and he's playing really poorly. And if that is the case, I think before the series started, George, me and you were talking about it, and I said, for the Timberwolves to win, basically, Anthony Edwards has to be consistent when he's having these huge games because he had a couple of 15, 16 pointers against the Suns, which you can't really have against the Nuggets. And Jamal Murray, if he keeps performing like he did in the Lakers, then I think the Timberwolves can win. And it looks like at the moment that's been the trend, and he's performed even worse. So I think the Timberwolves have got all the optimism in the world right now. Anthony Edwards is playing an unbelievable level. The defense as a team as a whole, I know you said before, people didn't see the Timberwolves really having major success in the playoffs or being the contender for the West. It's because people didn't know how that defense was going to translate, and we've seen it now. It's obviously Rudy is the main guy, and he wasn't even there in the last game, and they blew them out. But that's credit to the whole team. He is the anchor, but the whole team just gets after people and doesn't give them any space to breathe, forces the ball out, and it leads to opportunities for them and stifles, a Nuggets team that we say had always creating the best opportunities for their players, and they weren't able to do that. So, if you ask me now, I'd say the Timberwolves are going through.
Yeah, as a Timberwolves aficionado, it gives me great pleasure to sort of echo those sentiments. But yeah, I can't say I truly expected it. Obviously, I think with the Suns, we knew that was a presumed bad matchup for the Timberwolves going in. They just lost a game to them near or towards the end of the season. I think they swept them in the regular season as well. So to do that from them, for Edwards to sort of snatch the chain, shall we say, of someone like KD, who he's barking at, and who he said, that guy's my sort of hero, my uncle growing up, and then just sort of killing him Same with Devin Booker. Obviously, Bradley Beal is not even worthy of being in that conversation at this moment in time. So that was fun in itself. And obviously, these two games that he's put on the Nuggets have been really, really something to watch. It gives you sort of like, I know people make the Jordan, the Kobe comparisons. I don't really like those very much. It gives me much more 06 Dwayne Wade vibes. You know, that young upstart who you just can't stop when it's getting downhill, and it just defense, it's offense, it's all over the shop. But you know, it's not just him, obviously, but the Nuggets have absolutely no one to guard him on that end. And like you say, that team defense, they're picking up Jokic full court. They're really forcing him to play at a pace that he is not comfortable with, because he likes to set that and he likes to make it slow and considered. But they're forcing him to, you know, take and make decisions, which is something that, you know, not any other team has actually managed to do. So I think there goes a lot of credit there. Like you said, Cat was the one doing that yesterday. Naz Reid also had a couple blocks in there as well. So it's really looking good. And you just look at the depth compared to the Denver Nuggets, which was my main concern coming in, I think, when they've lost Bruce Brown. You know, now that Jamal Murray, I wrote down here actually that last year he was on 26 points with 47% shooting. This year he's on 20 points with 37% shooting. So he's really taken a dip this time around, and that's something they can't afford. So it's looking good, I think, quite considerably. And then you look to the next game, the next series, presumably, it's either the Thunder or the Mavericks, obviously. And I'm not sure if either of those teams have the ability to either deal with Edwards. They don't have anyone that can guard him, but they definitely don't have the size with, you know, Towns. If he can stay out of foul trouble, that was his first big game in the playoffs yesterday because he didn't get into foul trouble. It's been really frustrating to watch that. So if he can keep doing that and providing that second piece as well, it's looking quite good for that, you know, that next step and that next step, you know, whoever that may be. So yeah, I don't want to go too positive, but it's looking good. I can't deny.
No, I think in terms of, like, especially in the playoffs, momentum is such a big thing.
Yeah,
we can sit down at the start of it and we can do our brackets, and we take off sort of obviously our thoughts and feelings on players and teams, but we also go off of where teams were in the regular season that year. And I think going into it, the Timberwolves had been good. There'd been no one denying it, but people hadn't. They weren't really giving them the respect, shall we say, of sometimes comes across from the regular season into the postseason. And I completely agree. I think when this comes down to it, whoever they get out of this Thunder Mavs series, I don't know how they match up against them. I think especially, I would tend to fear. I think that the Mavs are going to go through in that series personally.
Yeah.
I know the Thunder probably are the better team overall, but I think they've got the best player on the court, even though Luka's not 100%, but no one is. But I think when it comes down into that one as well, I just don't see how the Mavs are going to get past the Timberwolves in the current freight that they're in. And then it boils down to the question when you go to the other side of which, and obviously the Celtics Cavs that's coming up now, we all think that Boston are going to go through 4-0-4-1, shall we say? Right, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but we're all going to go around that side. Yeah, I think Donovan Mitchell
for a game, something like that.
Yeah,
he's already injured.
He's already injured.
That's what I mean.
Donovan Mitchell gets them a game, something like that called, right?
Yeah.
I think Knicks Pacers is going to be another close series from game one's shown it. I think that I personally am going to go for the Knicks again to go through. Boston Knicks is going to be an absolute like car crash of a conference finals if it comes to it. So they're going to, whoever comes through out of that, and I do think Boston, but it ain't going to be 4-1. I don't think that'll be a 4-1. I think that goes at least 6, personally.
Mm.
They're going to be banged up, especially from how whatever team plays it. And I think just coming into it right now, I was going at the start, there's no excuses, Mr. Tatum. I think Anthony Edwards has given him a little bit of a cop-out if he doesn't win an NBA Finals. I think there's no excuses for Tatum to get to a conference finals. But I think for an NBA Finals now, Mr. Anthony Edwards has been showing something.
I mean, jumping all the way to the finals, I think.
It's nuts. But I mean, yeah, if we're going on the hype, if we're going on the false, if we're going through everything for it, I think I still like we both said when we all done this. I mean, we had it was Nuggets Celtics as the finals, so we're still going to have Celtics coming out in the East. And I think if we're having the Timberwolves to beat the Nuggets, you'd then expect them to be going through anyway. So if you go down to that side of things, it's
I'm not sure with that. I do think the one thing I'd say is I do think the Mavs would. In terms of their offense, I do think the Timberwolves are better suited to stifle the offense of the Nuggets even though I think the Nuggets are a better offense than the Mavs, I do think Luka and Kyrie will cause them problems. So I think they're much more perimeter orientated, even though they do have good perimeter defenders, obviously the Timberwolves, but I think in totality, it is a tougher ask for them. So I would say I wouldn't immediately say, I think the Timberwolves are going to beat whoever comes out of the other series. But as you say, it is a good sign that they're doing this to the defending champs, basically, what I would call the best player in the league. So
I think as well, it'd be a real, like, I think because the perspective we were coming into the playoffs was with, like, Anthony Edwards is a very good player. We all knew he was a very good young player. He wasn't on the stratosphere, I don't think, in any of our perceptions of these guys, like top 10 guys. And he's come through and he's sort of claimed the scalps at KD and Booker. If they go through this series, which we're kind of assuming they are at this moment in time, and I don't want to count that out, by the way, because if anyone can pull them out of a ditch, it's Jokic. And, but if he does that, then you're claiming the scouts of Jokic, and then you're going through and that's like either that's SGA, that's Luka, that's Kyrie, and then you go through to the final. That'd be some run, and that'd be something that I don't think any of us can see we expected at this stage of his career. Obviously, only 22. That would be quite a milestone. Let's just say that.
I would say if you're Boston, you are absolutely praying that the Timberwolves knock out the Nuggets here, because I think you're looking and thinking, I think they're very confident in themselves if the Nuggets go out in the West, personally.
Yeah, but surely, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, I get what you mean a little bit, but there are certain ways in which I don't know what the regular season split was between. This is feeling way too presumptive, by the way. I'm not sure what the regular season split.
Yeah, we are flying ahead.
But I mean, I'm not sure. I feel like they've got the size to deal with a few things. Obviously, the Boston Celtics aren't going to be tested really until the conference finals. I don't feel like, not to dismiss the Cavs, but I am going to dismiss them. They just went to the 7 with the Orlando Magic, which shouldn't really be happening at that stage, and of their two progressive sort of like trajectories. So I don't know what the Celtics will look like in real deep clutch playoff basketball until it comes down to that finals, probably, which is the Eastern Conference Finals could be interesting, but I feel like they're probably going to deal with the competition quite well there.
I have just looked. They split the regular season, the Timberwolves and the Celtics. Funnily enough, both games went to overtime. So that's about as close as you can
could
get.
Be fun.
But yeah, as you say, it's leading a lot, but it's definitely not presumptuous to say that it's overwhelmingly likely that the Timberwolves are going to be getting to the Western Conference Finals, which is mad to say. And maybe a few opinions about big Rudy Gobert will be changing if
his aura lingered in that arena yesterday.
100%. I mean, look, I don't think you can go back and change the narrative that there's been on Rudy in the past years. I do think when you look back at him in terms of the criticism that he's got, I think it's been warranted. Maybe has it been over the top slightly? Yeah, fair enough. But I do think there has been fair criticism towards his game, especially in the playoffs when he was in Utah. Like I saw a few tweets was like, oh, maybe it was Utah that was the issue and not Rudy. No, there was definitely some performances in the playoffs alongside Donovan Mitchell that didn't work. And you can go with fit or whatever, but it seems to be working miles better now. And even though they got laughed at, and I still think they overpaid for him, and I will never be told that they didn't, but the fit is working with one of, if not the best young player in the league that's coming through in this playoffs at the moment, Anthony Edwards. And I know that phrase will get chop and changed every 5 minutes within the NBA. But that with a Karl Anthony Towns who hasn't really got to worry about being that center where he wasn't working in previous years again, it's all seemingly clicking into place with them.
Yeah, it is just, and it is with the NBA all the time. I think whenever you look at any of these big trades, it's regardless of the player. I mean, there are some players where it doesn't matter you put them in anywhere, they're going to succeed. But with especially a lot of the blockbuster trades that have happened, especially over the recent years, it has been a matter of how they fit in the teams that they're in. And I think with Gobert, there's the places you can put him in where his weaknesses will be amplified. And I think that Utah one with their perimeter defenders around him was definitely a place where that was amplified, especially in the playoffs. And there's places where they can compensate for that, like with what they've got now in the Timberwolves. And it's with any player, even the best players. I mean, we talk about Jokic and his defensive issues and the way it works in the Nuggets. They managed to make it so that it's not a negative at all. It's just it is what it is, and then offensively they're a juggernaut. And with the Timberwolves, you have Edwards, and in this playoffs he's being more consistent with that scoring, Cat's being consistent, and then you have that all-timer defense at the moment, just with a load of perimeter defenders and Rudy anchoring it. It's all how they fit together.
It's like interesting as well, the different approaches that we have, because I feel like where the Timberwolves, they can go on a run, and it's really, really hard to call that back right because that defense is just so hard to get past. Whereas someone like the Pacers, they keep teams in the game because of the fact that they cannot defend, and they do stuff well. And I think they deserve some degree of some props for knocking out the Bucks. I know that the Bucks were really undermanned at that stage, but I think after the first game they sort of looked at themselves and said, "This is what we do best. We'll make them run. This is kind of what gave us success in the regular season," and they replicated that quite well. And I think they were unlucky last night. I really thought they were, they should have won that game. Personally, I think there are a couple of bad calls there.
Violation.
Yeah,
a little kickball violation. Is that what we're going to?
I'm not going to lie. I mean, we say about the MSG atmosphere. We have been there, experienced it. Probably not like it is now. Playoff basketball is a different breed. I think they've got some very favourable calls at MSG, both in the previous round and this round. Or vice versa. I think there were some bad calls for they're going against them when they went to Philadelphia. So, but the officials seem to be quite swayed by that at this moment in time, and the technicals that they're giving as well are so stupid. But
that's really annoying me. The level of pettiness on the technicals has been stupid. But then it's not even consistent. Like Mike Malone,
that was a joke, wasn't it?
The Mike Malone one was ridiculous. He literally got within about an inch of him, spitting with rage. And didn't get a tech. No, he should have been thrown out, let alone just get a tech.
Do we think Jamal Murray is in line for a suspension?
I think it will be similar to, even though they're different incidents, I think it will be similar to the Embiid situation in the first round, where it's because it's in the middle of a playoff series.
Yeah.
And even more so than the Philly Knicks series, because this is defending champs as well, and they're down 0-2, I think they'll give them the benefit of the doubt and let them play.
My thoughts on this are that, one, I think it's worse than what Embiid done. I think if you're off the court and you're throwing stuff on twice to try, well, not to try and injure, but with the idea of injuring or having an effect on the game with what you're throwing on there, is way worse. I know Embiid's what he done was not right.
Yeah,
but
I think Embiid is worse for injuring people.
But this is the thing. If someone slips... If someone slips on that heat pack or the towel that he throws on and gets injured, Jamal Murray is definitely out for the rest of the series. There is no debate in it. Their hands would be tied. Because no one hits it, I think he gets a telling off and a fine.
Yeah,
that's what will happen.
In that situation, I think that's similar to, as you say, with the Embiid one, where it's like if Mitchell Robinson goes down and his ankle and he's out for the series, then Embiid's out. It's just... I think they'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If it was a regular season game, 100% I think he gets suspended. But because of the situation, because of who they are, I think they'll let it go.
I think as well.
I think he'll get fined, is what I mean. I think
you got to take into account the general history about it. I know you're probably not really meant to do this, but someone like Draymond, he'd get suspended for that. He has done many, many things. There's no really debate on that front because he has the history of doing it. So you need to punish him again. I don't think Embiid really has a particular reputation for, trying to injure people or stuff like that. I know some people get annoyed with the flopping and the foul, but whatever. That's not really my point. It's completely different. So he doesn't have a history of doing that. Jamal Murray certainly doesn't have a history of doing that. So I'm kind of fine. I don't want him to be suspended personally. Because I think
because you'll get the asterisk that everyone will say, "Oh yeah, but I know you won 2 games."
I mean, he's playing like rubbish anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But you want to see him taken down at full strength, basically.
No, yeah, I agree. So yeah, that would be my thoughts on the matter. But yeah,
do you see any upset in terms of? Obviously, I know that we're talking hyperbole in here if the Knicks are going through. Do you see a world in which, Boston have done it in many years now, don't get to a conference final. Like, don't go out from the conference finals and you see the Knicks in the finals. I know we're presumption here that the Knicks are going through. I do think that. Do either of you think the Pacers are beating the Knicks?
I think it's could be in the play.
I think they can, purely because if I had to pick, I'd pick the Knicks, obviously. But I think when we talk about styles of play, I think because the Pacers play at such a high pace and they're used to it, it descends in things into chaos a little bit. There's a lot less time for defenses to get set. Turnovers are generally, you get more turnovers when the pace is pushed, and the teams that are used to playing in that sort of environment generally will thrive. But as you say, I just think the Knicks' ability to have consistency that they've had in the playoffs, especially with Jalen Brunson. I know he had like a bad game in the Philly series, but he's really been consistent as of late with scoring. And how many second chances they make for themselves. I do think they can score with Indy throughout, even with the pace being that high, which is why I think they'll get through. And when you look past that and you look to, as you said, I know once again we're being very presumptuous here, but if you look to a Knicks Celtics conference finals, I mean, anything can happen. Obviously, I favour Boston, but you do look at some of the players on the Celtics and you say, is Jason Tatum, is Jaylen Brown, capable of having those games where they're very inconsistent, they don't shoot the ball well? Yes, and could the Knicks take advantage of that? Yes, obviously. But for me, with the Celtics this year, it's just they've got so many options. They are so deep. They can run so many sets that they can, with the series being extended long enough, they can find answers or push through when one of them or someone has a bad game.
I think with the Knicks as well, I mean, the template we saw when we went to see them live, they played the Lakers that game. And it was a case where I think in the fourth quarter, where it was kind of close, and then in the fourth quarter, the Lakers got away with it. I think they actively decided that we're going to let the rest of the Knicks try and beat us and stop Jalen Brunson. And maybe that's easier said than done, right? There are some players that you can't stop. I'm not sure I see Brunson in that realm yet. Maybe he is, and maybe that's being a bit disrespectful, but I'm not quite there yet. But I feel like there's probably ways to kind of stop him and halt him. I know in the first couple of games, the Sixers done a pretty good job of it. And I think that would be the way that I would try to. But the Pacers are so bad defensively that it's just kind of like hoping for them or trying to get them to stop anyone is kind of, it's a tall ask, basically. So I do think as well, in terms of the best player battles, at the moment, I think the Pacers' best player is Pascal Siakam. I don't think Tyrese Halliburton is anywhere near it. He hasn't been for a couple months now.
Not healthy.
He's not. And I think he picked up something in the regular season. I think he's picked up like a back injury in the playoffs as well. So he's playing very passively, and that probably doesn't go towards you either. But I do like, I like a lot of the players on the Pacers. And I think that's why they roughed it up a little bit with them yesterday and they got them running. So there's the way. I can see a path for the Pacers winning it. I would pick the Knicks. And then in that series, when you're getting, like Lewis says, the talent and the offensive depth, but also someone like Drew Holiday, Derek White on Jalen Brunson. Yeah. It's very tough. It's very tough for me to see them lifting that over, especially because they are both missing. I think they've got an offensive ceiling without Julius Randle and Bogdanovich. So that was how I would see it. But yeah.
It's more of, I think it comes there's intangible factors. Like if you go on and you match up player for player, like the Sixers probably beat the Knicks, but they don't. Like if you know what I mean, like how we sit there and we do this with the Celtics. I think if you do that against any team, the Celtics wipe the floor with every team, but it doesn't always work that way. In the same argument in terms of how we've seen Tyrese Halliburton, and I know that Tyrese Halliburton's injured, so it's probably not the right way to say this. Yet to see a game in the last sort of 20 now from Jason Tatum, where I'm like, stamped his authority. And I know it's the regular season back end of it, didn't really care. But even in that first round against the Heat, he didn't have a game. Not that he needed to, but he didn't do it. Like he didn't cut.
That's kind of what I think it is. But that can be what Knicks the Knicks. I mean, it steals the Knicks a game potentially. Is maybe Louis said they haven't been tested. Maybe the Knicks rest on their laurels. I mean, the Celtics rest on their laurels, and the Knicks come out and take one. You don't know.
Like I feel like that's genuinely going to be a thing when it comes to it. The only thing I'll say about the Knicks and the Pacers as well is the Pacers' depth, like we've just mentioned. I think the Pacers have got, like last night, their bench scoring was like 46-4 or whatever it was, and I know Isaiah Jackson had a great game, but they are deeper. And if these games, that's going to have took bells and whistles out of them this morning, and then they got to go again tomorrow. So I know that this team are fatigued and they've played all of these games like this, but it isn't sustainable. It's not. So there will be moments in this series where a TJ McConnell coming in for a Deuce McBride, who, all right, he's had his moments, but there is going to be a matchup difference there, is all I'll say. But
TJ's going to have a huge series because he did, apart from the last game in the first round, he did not have a good playoff performance. And in that last game we just saw, he did give them production off the bench, but that is what he's been doing the whole regular season, and we need to see that in this series for the Pacers to go for it.
I think as I keep thinking about sort of like how important Porzingis is to that Celtics team as well. Obviously, I don't think he'll play this series, and I don't think he needs to. But is there something to be said about catching back up to sort of playoff pace and everything like that, especially for an injury-prone player? Especially, I can't remember what he injured now. Was it his calf? Those are always quite a struggle to come back from. There's a pretty large frequency of repeat injury. I would be very, very shocked if he lasts the playoffs in its entirety, personally. And that's I think that he's so big for them personally, because once you remove him out of the equation, I know they do have more offensive depth now. Drew Holiday there, and I think some guy that's a bit older and maybe a bit wiser, but I do think there are ways that, you know, the ball can get stuck in both Brown and Tatum's hands, can't it? And like George said, Tatum hasn't impressed in a while. I'm not sure if they've got that intensity that they need at this moment in time. So maybe they do need like a red-blooded, you know, stone throwing series at MSG in the Garden and going back and forth. Maybe that's something they need. But it's probably not theoretically in your head something that you want going into it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, no Porzingis changes how they play offensively completely, just because the spacing is not there. The amount of room for Tatum and Jaylen Brown to operate, you know, is much, much smaller when Porzingis isn't spacing the floor. So I do think it makes a massive difference whether he's available or not. And I think he'll, in terms of if he is back fit, getting back up to speed, I don't think that'll be an issue. It will just be a matter of if he can just stay healthy for the rest of the playoffs.
Indeed. Right, boys, I know that we this one was going to be a little bit of a shorter one because obviously we're in the middle of the playoffs. There's not as much to talk about and go on for it where we are. I think we wrap that one up there, really. I think there's not much else to sort of go on for now. I think when we get into conference finals, it's going to be a bit juicier. We'll delve into some sort of matchup comparisons then. I know we've touched on it briefly, but is there anything else that you boys wanted to mention?
No, the last ones would just be obviously some of the awards are rolling in, but the ones that have come in so far, you know, everyone knew that Wemby was winning Rookie of the Year. Everyone knew that Mark Bracknell was winning Coach of the Year. So there's not too much to talk about there. Just congratulations to them both, obviously.
Yeah, I think some of the awards as well this year, like the teammate one, like they are pulling awards out their backside.
Oh yeah, I've got six man as well. I can't leave that on.
Oh, that's a big thing as well. Yeah, the Naz Reid one, and then I think Defensive Player of the Year gets announced tomorrow or tonight, and it's obviously going to be Rudy. I don't think anyone else is going to win this.
Yeah, 100%.
And you think Game 3, massive must-win game for Denver. Minnesota in their own house are going to get Naz Reid being presented with Sixth Man of the Year, Rudy just having his child, and Defensive Player of the Year. Like, there isn't really much more that could be going for them going into that as a win. So that's definitely going to be one to watch. But no, we'll be back when we're a little bit more in delve. Probably conference finals time is when we'll sit back down. We'll assess the playoff bracket and where we are in that situation then. But apart from that, thank you very much for listening. If you are watching this over on our YouTube channel, make sure you do drop a subscribe, leave a like on the video, comment down below who you think is going to win the NBA playoffs, and has it changed from when we started the NBA play-in, is where I always sort of classically now say that the playoffs start. If you're listening to this on audio, please feel free to leave us a review. It helps us out more than you could possibly imagine. But apart from that one, for myself, for Louis, for Lewis, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.